And returning to our top story tonight, former US President Donald Trump indicted for a third time. He's facing 4 criminal charges over his alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The counts include conspiracy to defraud the United States, tampering with a witness, and conspiracy against the rights of citizens. On Truth Social, the former president issued a statement saying the indictment was the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, where he claims he's the undisputed frontrunner, leading by a substantial margin. For more on this, let's bring in Emma Doyle, the former White House principal deputy chief of staff during the Trump administration. Emma, thank you very much for your time and for joining us on what is a major news day. What is your reaction to the news that Trump today indicted over his attempt to overturn the 2020 election result?
I think once again, it's another unprecedented day in American history. We've never seen a former president charged with something like this. We never saw a day like January 6th before in the history of our country. So I think it continues to add to the unprecedented feel of the 2024 election cycle and what we saw throughout the Trump presidency, where there's really been one headline after another.
I mean, we just saw the statement that the Trump campaign released on social media. Trump himself hasn't spoken, but that statement he released, he's saying this is a political witch hunt, that the timing of this is designed to interfere with the 2024 election. You worked for him as Deputy Chief of Staff. You then worked for the First Lady, Melania. Tell me what him and his team would be thinking in mounting this argument.
I think they know that this is a very effective argument for the Trump voter base. I think Americans in general, especially on the political right, have a deep-seated concern about government overreach and the role of government institutions. So they're particularly likely to see this in the way that he's describing it, as a politically motivated action. I think he knows this is a very effective way to continue to fundraise. He's certainly seen that from the first 2 indictments, where his poll numbers actually improved among Republican voters and his fundraising went up. So I think he's using the same playbook because he knows it's worked in the previous 2 cases. And some of his voter base may not care about the nature of the indictment. Some of them do see this as a very politically motivated action.
And what about the substance of his claims, though? And I did show a timeline at the start of the show that every time there was a serious issue emerging against Hunter Biden, that Jack Smith, came out with more charges or a fresh indictment against Trump. Do you think there is the argument that politics is playing into this, even if there is substance to the charges? Do you think politics is also playing into Jack Smith's actions?
I think it would be difficult to be at the Department of Justice in a Biden administration and not know that your actions are going to have an impact on the election cycle, whether you mean them to or not. But I think that's, even if people think they're being unbiased in the way that they're timing this, that I don't know if it's actually possible to be when you are appointed by a Democratic administration and serve at the pleasure of the president.
And what about that point that Megyn Kelly made, that it would be virtually impossible to find a juror that would be on Trump's side, given something like 92 or 96% of voters supported Biden in that state?
I think it would be difficult to go anywhere in the world and find someone who hasn't heard of Donald Trump and doesn't have an opinion about Donald Trump. I certainly haven't met anyone in that category. So I do think that will be another extraordinary challenge in this, and certainly for Trump's legal team as well, something they'll be taking into account, what those jurors will have as an impression and how they can shape that in the case itself.
And knowing him as well as you do, how would he be reacting to this privately? Would he be, angry and rattled like Maggie Haberman says, or would he be saying, this can just galvanize more support for him?
I think it's both. I think that he's definitely would be angry. He does feel that he's been targeted for years, going back to the beginning of the 2016 campaign cycle. That's been a consistent theme both in the White House and on the campaign trail afterwards. So I do think he's angry that this is happening. just because he sees an upside on fundraising doesn't mean that he would want this to happen. And I think he would be rattled by the fact that these are some very serious charges. It's not the kind of thing that there's a good template to look towards in the past and say, like there was with the case in New York, the first indictment, where to the extent there's precedent in the U.S. political and legal system, it went well for the defendant. So this is a very different type of case, and it's much more serious. I think he would definitely be taking that into account in terms of personal liability, more so than political favorability.
And I mean, we're looking at the polls, and he's clearly the Republican frontrunner. What do you think we're looking at here? Could there be a case where he does end up in prison, but yet is still running to be president?
Absolutely. It's unknown, it's untested in the U.S. system whether or not a president can use the federal pardon authority to pardon himself, basically because we've never had a case like this before, and I don't think our founding fathers thought that we'd be in this position. But it's legal under the U.S. Constitution, and it's certainly something for Trump, who is no stranger to controversy and is used to being in unusual positions. I would not put it past him to run even if he were in prison. I think that the timing of the case would make it unlikely that he would be in a cell before the 2024 election, but I'm uncertain of how quickly the team is going to be able to move on this.
Look, and just before you go, I mean, you worked for the First Lady. How does she respond? She's very private. We don't see a lot of her. How does she respond to these sort of things? Is she very loyal? Would she be, angry alongside her husband, thinking this is terribly unfair, or would she be able to take kind of a more objective view of this?
No, I think she's extremely loyal to him, and I think they have a much closer relationship behind closed doors than most people see in public, just because she is so private and very focused on her son and on her family. But I think, especially as someone who didn't seek out a life in politics and didn't choose to personally run for office, she's very supportive of him, but I think would also be very angry that these attacks are continuing and that it has an effect on her family.
Yeah. All right, Emma Doyle, thank you very much for your time. We should point out you left 20 days before the events on January 6th, so well and truly not there, and now you're working for Bondi Partners, and we'll hopefully see you live in the Sydney studio Thursday next week. Really looking forward to meeting you in person.
Likewise, thank you.